Welcome to Retirementals, a podcast that dives headfirst into the issues facing the financial sector at the intersection of investment, technology and financial advice. Hosted by Abraham Oksanya, you can expect raw honesty, critical analysis and energetic interviews. Here is your host, Abraham Oksanya.
All right, hello and welcome to Retirementals. I'm Abraham Oksanya and I'm excited to have you all here today. I am super excited by our guest today, Bella Caridade-Ferreira, who is the CEO of Fundscape. Bella, welcome to Retirementals.
Hello, Abraham. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you. Thank you for making the time to speak to me. Look, there's a lot in our conversations that I want to unpack. You're one of these big brains in the industry.
Oh, thank you.
You know, the sort of having a detailed dive into what firms are doing in terms of platforms, in terms of the asset management and fund inflows. All those sort of things. So, but for people who maybe have been living under the rock for the last 20 years, who are not familiar.
Don't rub it in. I know I've been around for 20 years, Abraham. I need to rub it in there.
Who maybe aren't aware of the journey that you've been through. Give us an insight to the journey that you've been through and that led you to the creation of Fundscape and what you do.
Oh gosh, you're asking me to go right back to the beginning. Okay, so in the late 90s, I was actually working in investment banking. And I fell into investment banking really quite by accident, mainly because this was when the whole of Europe decided to privatize all their national banks, etc. And I have this amazing, I speak three languages. I speak French, Spanish, Portuguese, and a little bit of Italian. So suddenly, my skills, I went to work for sort of M&A, corporate finance, in the financial institutions group. Suddenly my skills were in huge demand because I was able to write pitches and presentations in several languages. So right. I didn't go into investment banking in the traditional way, which a lot of people do, straight from university, etc. It really was, I'd had literally just had my son and was flicking through the newspaper and there was this advert, and it's a desperate need for people, with languages and who were numerical. So gave it a try. And so I was there really, so that's how I started. And I went to work for Merrill Lynch, and I was there until about 2001. And then, to be fair, I mean, as a woman, it's already hard working in investment banking. I'll repeat that. It's already hard to work in investment banking for anybody because you have to work really, really long hours. But as a woman and a mother and a wife, it was exceptionally hard. So this was not conducive to married life, family life. So it certainly wasn't conducive to family life. So I decided to make the switch. And while I was thinking about making that switch, I was approached by somebody out of the blue who asked me if I would be interested in going to work for them, because I had the language skills, etc. And this was a very small business called Ferry Fund Market Information, and I was their very first employee, and they employed me a week before 9/11. And they had just got the funding together to start this amazing new project it was an amazing new project at the time called Sales Watch. And they had about 10 to 15 clients that signed up, many of them cross-border fund managers. And again, so they needed someone to help coordinate all the, stuff. And then 9/11 happened, Abraham, and overnight, of those 15 clients, 10 of them melted away overnight. However, that was an interesting part from that point on. So that was sort of September 2001. 6 years later, we sold ourselves to Lipper, Thomson Reuters. So we sold ourselves to Lipper while Thomson and Reuters were merging. So Lipper was Reuters. So we went through a double merger. I mean, you couldn't you couldn't ask for more. What was really, really interesting about this double merger that we went through is that the Thomson Reuters one went through quicker than ours did, you know, so that was quite interesting. And so I went from working from a relatively small team of 20 people into this huge organization, and it's not easy working in big organizations, you know, you've got hundreds of thousands of people and you get bombarded by emails, people telling you what to do and everything else. And it took me a long time to actually just ignore 90% of the emails that I was getting, you know, because I was obviously very senior, and then people email you and say, you need to do this, you need to do that, and you need to do this. And I was getting, you know, I was getting really stressed about this. And then actually there's two questions that you should always ask. That's great. Who's paying for it? Because that makes 90% of those communications disappear. So I used to do that. And the other thing I used to do was just ignore. And then what happens is people, after 6 months or a year, they remember that they emailed you and then they send you another one. But that's how you deal with communications in huge organizations. It was quite interesting. What was also really interesting about Lipper is that they just leave you alone. So, you know, the two CEOs that we'd had before we were acquired, they left the business. So my colleague and I, Mauro Baratta at the time, we literally were running the whole thing. You run the whole show. No one, you know, as long as you're meeting all your targets, etc. So I developed, you know, in that short space of time, some very strong skills, you know, because you had to claim, you know, you had to apply for funding and do all that stuff, but you're just a business unit, and you just get on and deal with it. But it did get to the point where I just thought, I just can't do this anymore, and I'm better off serving the clients from a smaller base. And that's when I went off and set up Fundscape, really, in 2010. Do you want me to keep talking, or do you want to ask me any question? I'll keep going. Okay. So so I went off and set up Fundscape, and at the time, you know, we talked to clients and said we were going. And this was really interesting, Abraham, because you know, sometimes when you talk to clients, you don't get a huge amount of feedback from them. But I was making personal calls and ringing people and say, look, we're leaving Lipper, Thomson Reuters, and people were very upset. And they were ringing us, and I got lots of job offers, which was amazing. I was like, people want me to work for them? My goodness, what's going on? You know, so that was quite an eye opener, because until then it wasn't really, you know, how people felt about me and my research, etc., in the market wasn't really obvious to me. But when I was telling people that I was going, some were very upset, and you know, I had to try and explain that I'm going, but I will come back in a few months' time. You know, we just want to do things a bit differently. So that really reassured people. But as I said, the job offers, etc., really surprised me. And then we set up Fundscape, and just after our gardening leave had ended, we literally ran around to every single fund manager who'd been working with us before, and platform, etc., and sort of said, we're starting again. And not every single one subscribed straight away.
Wow.
It was a massive vote of confidence. Not a single one who hadn't, you know, not a single company, and we were brand new. Not a single company said no. Not a single company. In fact, we ended up with more clients than that, you know, in November 2010 than we'd had in June 2010. You know, so that was a really massive vote of confidence, and it meant that, you know, we hit the road running. So, you know, I literally put £500 into the business, and I used that £500 to build a cheap website, and that was it. You know, in that November we generated a whole load of invoices for a year's subscription. But it was I don't think that could happen now, Abraham, because there's so much compliance and so much due diligence that has to be done, that most people would say, oh, we're really sorry, we just can't, our compliance departments won't support you. But this is just 12 years ago, and every single fund management company in the country, or the top 50, supported us and said yes and signed our agreements. We had confidentiality agreements. They signed them without blinking. It was, I think, it's amazing how much things can change in the last, in the 10 or years that have gone by. So yes, so we built a business, and as you know, when you're the head of your own business, you're allowed to be a bit more mouthy than you would be if you're part of a big corporation, right? Because obviously, I was an official spokesman at Lipper Thompson Reuters, but I couldn't get away with saying someone's a fuckwit or tell so and so, or stuff like that. You just have to be a bit more careful because you could get into a lot of trouble. And obviously, I run my own business. You run your own business. I think we're both respected for the fact that we are independent of thought. So I don't upset my clients, but equally, I'm not going to shy away from discussing certain issues. So I try and be as balanced as I can and I think now when I talk to a lot of my clients, that's the one thing that they like, is that they know that I'm not, being paid to support a particular message or support, even, as some of our competitors have been accused of. They know that doesn't happen here. That one week I might be writing about so and so's brilliant stuff, and the following week I might have to draw attention to the fact that they've done something silly, but in a nice way. I think it's in a nice way. And I think that's so. I think over the years they respect my independence of thought, and they no longer, in the old days, they would send me, you'd get reams of really terribly written emails of things that people wanted you to say about them in my report. And
yes,
I go, no, sorry, I write my stuff, and I'd go back and say, this is really badly written. I can't include this. Sorry. I'm really fussy about grammar and punctuation, and just the style is really bad, really bad. I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to say no. Let me write what I want to write in my report. So now nobody asks. Now nobody ever asks, and it's good. And obviously, I can still offend a few people. There's a particular CEO of a small platform that has been sold that isn't talking to me at the moment.
I'm fascinated by that, by how you deal with people who take things personally. I think that to a good extent, you and I are notorious for saying what we think. There was somebody who remained nameless. This is actually a good conversation, and they said to me that when they were at co-funds, the term was, Bella used to make my life hell. In other words, every time you say something in the press or you publish your data, there's this whole sort of chain reaction happening within these organizations about what you'd publish or what you were going to say about them.
So you're right, it is a difficult one to manage, but I think the thing that, so I'm not deliberately nasty or cruel, but for example,
well, I am, but carry
but what I try and do is, you can't ignore the elephant in the room, right? So if the main focus of the platform report is, is a benchmarking report for a lot of people. We're looking at the assets, the gross and net sales, etc. If someone is persistently at the bottom of the table for a particular reason, then it's not something I can ignore. I need to talk about it and I need to explore it. And sometimes I might sort of, so there's a couple of things we do. I always interview people. In every report, I will have a conversation with at least one or two people, and I will include bits of that conversation. And it's got to the point, people actually really like that. They really, really like seeing, what people say and everything else. But I also do it in a way, I try and unpick it in a really thoughtful way. Why has this gone wrong? What was could be a thing from the past. They could be dealing with an issue that is no fault of their own. It could, it could be something that started 20 years ago, or it's a company strategy, etc. But I make the point of being friendly, always friendly, polite. I speak to everybody in exactly the same way, whether you're, cleaning the toilets or you're the CEO. I'm very respectful of people's time. I'm a small business. I don't expect people to give me, all their time, so I will ask nicely. But I just think that over time, people have I'd say a grudging respect for the fact that I'm going to say what I want to say, and not what you want me to say about you. But I think why they like that is because it happens to everybody. So everybody, at some point or other, I might have talked about Aviva or Novia or co-funds or things that they've done, or I might draw some light on it. So now what happens is that I have meetings every month with all the top people, and they get in touch with me if they want to talk me through their numbers and explain things. And I think because it is balanced, it's not it's not sort of a knife fest or whatever. It is. I try and give it as balanced a view as possible. And I suppose there's a lot of insight there. I always give my opinion. I say what I think is going to happen, and so it's quite interesting when I do talk to very senior people, because they will sometimes quote back things that I've written, and I realise that they have actually read it from top to bottom, which is also a nice thing to know. But also, Abraham, I think I'm only as good as the last report I wrote. I'm only as good as that. I can't coast forever on past glories, and this is what a lot of companies do. So everything I do, every time I pick up my pen or my laptop to write something, I put a huge amount of effort into it. And every report has got to be as good as it possibly can be. I don't do it's good enough. It's got to be, my team will tell you, and they'll probably, they'll tell you, I'm a perfectionist, and I will go through it and go through it and go through it, even if it means I only change 2 words, but to get the tone right. So, I'm humble. I'm humble. I come from humble backgrounds. My parents were immigrants to this country. They worked really hard. I was given a work, from them I have a work ethic. So I work bloody hard every day. And I'm also conscious that I'm only as good as my last report. Next week, following month, next year, someone else may be thinking they can do. And as you and I both know, we have lots of competitors in the market who are always snapping at our heels and trying to do what we do. So that's yeah.
No, it's fascinating. You clearly manage this whole sort of process, sort of this good friction, in my view, than I did in my days as a consultant. And I'm fascinated by your thoughts around, well, look, you're humble about it. And thinking about that humble background and immigrant background, I guess I approach it differently. I am a first generation British. In other words, I am an immigrant.
Yes.
Like I tell my kids, I came into this country with my feet. You came in head first, right?
Yes. That's a really good point. Yeah.
If they're born here, and so I have a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, I didn't travel, 6,000 miles across Africa to kiss anybody's butt in Britain. But anyway, let's leave.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point, though, isn't it, Abraham? Because you're right, and certainly my parents as immigrants would be much more, like, know your place, etc. But there's 2 things. As a woman in financial services, you can either be, try and fit in and try and, in a male-dominated world, or you try and stand out. And when I first started working at Ferry, I had a brilliant boss, Rodney. He's just retired, actually. And I tried to be what I thought a woman in the city should be, right? And that's wear suits and wear high heels. And that's not me. I'm a tomboy. You know me. I'm a tomboy. I got mad curly hair. You never see me in a pair of you'd never ever see me in a pair of heels, apart from at, Platform of the Year awards or something like that. That's the only time. So I tried to be everything I wasn't, and at the same time tried to be what I thought was the right kind of woman in this industry, which was basically smile, look pretty, don't say anything, which is absolutely anathema to me, really. So, and my boss actually he said, "Why are you trying to be something you're not?" He said, "People like your wit, people like your tongue, use it, speak up, say what you think, don't hold back." So he gave me active encouragement to be myself, rather than trying to fit into this. Well, I had this outdated view of what a woman should be like in this industry, and so he gave me that the encouragement to be like that. So within that small business, and then that obviously that carried on, and obviously I'm in my 50s now and ornery and old and got plenty to say about everything. But yes, so that's really where we are. You asked me, so that was really how we got to Fundscape, and then you asked me about Finscape and what that is about.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by Finscape and your partnership with Altus. What are you trying to do? Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so we've gone from a world where 20, 30 years ago, a fund manager would sell to an advisor and an advisor would sell to the client. And a fund manager, if he wanted to sell more funds to that advisor, he would pay a higher retrocession, right? A higher commission. So, not all advisors work like that, but a lot of them did. So it was really easy for a fund manager. He knew who his advisor clients were, and if he wanted to sell more, he just paid a higher commission, and so on. And then the world changed. Platforms came along, inserted themselves in the value chain. Suddenly there was a bit of obscurity because the platforms were doing that job, and they were aggregating those sales. So there's two things that happen. For a fund manager, there was an upside to that because suddenly they weren't getting hundreds of thousands of little volumes coming through on fax, as that's used to be, right? All these fax machines. So they could get rid of all their armies of people because they were getting from the platforms big, fewer sales, but they were much larger in volume. That was the upside. So it gave them efficiency to scale, etc. The downside to that was that in doing so, suddenly they didn't really know who their clients were. Yeah. And then of course, so even if you set aside all the regulatory obligations that we've had, like treating customers fairly, suitability, etc., if you're trying to design a product for somebody right at the end of a value chain, and you have no idea what they want, how they're going to use it, whether it's part of a retirement scheme or anything.
You manage the money, but you don't know who the client is, and you don't know what the money is for.
Yes, and you don't know any of that. And so how do you design product? How do you make sure that you have the right people selling your product? Because you could have, a fund manager could have an army of 30 sales guys, but actually he doesn't know two of them might be the only ones who are bringing in the business. The rest might be just coasting, hanging on his coattails. So what Finscape was about, and we already had Touchstone in the past, which I'm sure you know about. Touchstone.
Yes.
Then Financial Clarity came in and everything else. But looking at those systems, and I worked very closely with Financial Clarity. So looking at that system, what really bothered me about that was the length of time it takes to get any data on it. And there was a lot of double counting in it too. So for example, if you did a sale in January of this year, 2021, then that's not going to, so that will be in your quarterly data. That wouldn't be published by Financial Clarity until May. Okay, so how is that relevant anymore? It's not fresh, it's not timely, it's not relevant, it's not actionable. So I think that was, for me, the issue really. So I said, if I'm a fund manager, I want to see data that is weeks old, not months old. And preferably I want to see data that is just month end plus 2-3 days. So that's really where it started. And we started talking about it and designing it backwards very much from a user's perspective, rather than so that's what we changed. We did completely differently. Most people design it from a software. You get software people who design and go, well, this is how I want it to work, but actually they're not taking users' perspective into account. So we did it back to front. What does the user need, and how can we accommodate that in our models? What do we do? So we work backwards. And then we also did some really fresh thinking as well, because to make Finscape work, we need to have platform data. We need all the platforms to give us data as well. So I went through all the platforms and said, look, you have the same needs as fund managers. You also want to know what the market trends are. You want to know whether you're the first or second or third platform, or you have the same kind of analysis needs. So if we give you what you need for free, will you give us your data? And that basically was what's happened. So in just over a year, we've got the same number of platforms as Financial Clarity. So we're the last 3 are just sort of going through due diligence and legals, etc. But by the end of the year, we will have more platforms than the current incumbent in the market, Financial Clarity.
And so the idea is to have a technology hub or a platform where the platforms will supply data, and if you're a platform, you can only see the data if you contribute to the data of fund inflow, where the money is going.
Exactly. So for example, you've got your wonderful new service, Betafolio, right?
Correct.
So you're a DFM. So you will be able to come onto the thing, and you will be able to see all the advisors in the market that use DFMs.
Right.
Okay? So you'll be able to look at an advisor and go, right, my share of that advisor's business is 10%. That's great. Last month, I only had 5%. If, for example, you can see that your share of his business is shrinking, that allows you to now, what you won't be able to see is who else he's using, which other DFMs, because obviously that would be just a bit too transparent. But you will have a good view of what's happening in the market. So you'd be able to see, right, 70% of all advisors are now using DFMs, and our share of that whole DFM business is 5, 10, 15, 20%. Our share of the assets is this much, our share of the flows is this much. You will also be able to see trends in, for example, the type of models being used, that kind of thing. So what we're doing is acting as a huge repository, giving people the market context and giving you a resource to help you focus your sales more carefully. So if you're a fund manager, so go ahead, yeah.
No, carry on, sorry.
I was going to say, if you're a fund manager, for example, you may look at the market and see that the market is rotating. You may have a European equity fund. You may go, right, the whole of the market seems to be rotating from European equity into US equity. Now, if you've got a US equity fund, that's great, because you can pick up the phones, you can go and look at those people who are rotating, say, I've got a great US equity fund, don't move, stay with me. But if you haven't, you can also understand that, okay, well, maybe if is this a permanent rotation? Is it a more structural change in the market? Do I need to launch my own fund? And then, or equally, you could be looking as a fund manager, looking at all the models and the model portfolios and thinking, I'm not getting a big chunk of that business. What's wrong with my funds? What do I need to do? Do I need to reduce the fees? Do I need to improve the performance? How do I get onto these models, into these portfolios? So there's a whole host of stuff, but equally we can act as a bit of an Amazon, where a fund manager can say, well, look, we've got all this target market stuff that we need to send out to all the platforms, and we don't want to do that. Can we just give it to you? And then they can give it to us and we will just disseminate it for them. And vice versa. The platforms may say to us, we've got a whole load of MI that needs to go to a whole load of fund managers. Can we give you one lot of MI and you make sure that the right bits get to the right people? And we go, yeah, of course. So we're a sort of an Amazon in that we've got our own product and our own service to deliver, but we can also facilitate ancillary services for both the fund managers, the DFMs, and the platforms.
So fascinating. So this is, and the level of the insight is at sort of fund manager or fund level, platform level, or DFM platform and DFM level, and then the advisor.
Yeah, so it goes down to the advice firm level.
Right. Okay.
So advice firm level. So you'd be able to drill right down to the advice firm level, not the individual advisor. We've had a lot of debate about that on whether, they're obviously professionals on a register, etc. But for GDPR reasons, we have decided to just go down to the advice firm level.
Right. And I'm assuming then is there insights even if anonymized?
So the insight
end consumer level, right? The actual investor.
So we don't show consumer stuff.
Right.
We don't go that low. So all this data is anonymized and aggregated. So for example, you'll be able to go on Abraham and look at, say, the northeast of England. Say, right, I want to know what the average advisor's doing there. So you would be able to work out what the average pot size is, for example, whether they use models, what the trends are locally. And then, if you were deciding to expand there, then you could look at all the firms, for example, where they've got a lot of opportunity, they're interested in models. That would give Ed his little list, and off Ed could go and get some sales done. That's the kind of thing so it's a useful, in this day and age, money and resources tight. So what we're doing is taking data and turning it into intelligence for fund companies, platforms, DFMs, and there'll be more. There'll be more plans. We started with the UK, obviously, and we started with platforms. And the next step would be to go into Europe. In fact, we're already, because some of the fund managers that we've signed up are already giving us the MI. So even if we don't have all the platforms and all in Europe, if the fund managers that we're signing give us the MI from those platforms, we can give them a complete book view of their book of business.
And are you focusing on advisor platform only, or D2C, and what happens with the off-platform stuff? So
we're focusing mainly on intermediated businesses. That's going to be on and off platform. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because we'll be able to see, for example, if all the fund managers and all the platforms give us data, we'll be able to see all the D2C business. And then that's fine. We can identify it. But really, what people are interested in is the intermediated business. Who's managing. Who's got money? Who's managing clients? Who's managing, wealth on a discretionary or advisory basis? How do I get my funds in the door? But what we also show people, for example, is that they may be looking at an advisor firm, but if that advisor firm is holding, good funds, they're just not going to switch. You can't, we show you the opportunity based on your own fund ratings, for example. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. This is the whole new episode, Abraham, that you can bring me back to do a whole Finscape episode if you want.
Absolutely, we should totally do that. I want to get your view on a couple of other things though. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to platform. Your latest sort of platform report essentially put AUM on platforms in general at 800 billion, which is incredible when you think about it, as of the end of March 2021. So can you break that down for us in terms of advisor platform versus D2C or direct platform, and the key drivers there?
So we have, the interesting thing is, of course, we have lots of platforms that are not just one channel. There's lots of multi-channel platforms now. You've got your Fidelities, Agons, etc. So most of the platforms report all their data. So the retail advised channel, with the advisor platforms, that's about 550. And there's a chunk in institutional corporate business. and then the D2C. So the D2C bit is growing quite fast. And that's been a really, this year has been so interesting. You know, I say this year, what I mean is that since March 2020 until now, the last 18 months, the post-pandemic era has been really interesting because D2C has taken off hugely. You know, you get the likes of AJ Bell who are actually producing, generating sales of equal measure through both channels. That was unheard of a couple of years ago, you know, for AJ Bell. So it's really, really strong. And the pandemic did a couple of things, didn't it? People were at home and they had less to do. They didn't have anywhere to go. They didn't have any sporting events to watch. They didn't have it. So, you know, having sort of cleaned the house and done the garden and everything else, they then go, bloody hell, I better tackle my finances. And it sort of spawned this whole massive interest. So having started tackling their finances, people have gone, and then they've also got extra cash in the bank because they're not going out. So suddenly it's, how do I invest this? So, you know, so it's great to see this huge, you know, swell of D2C activity. For me, my concern really is that people, I absolutely love and want to encourage people to invest. I'm a great believer that I don't want to make rich people richer, Abraham. I say this all the time. I want to democratize investments for everyone, and an investment is for everyone. My concern is that people are rushing in. So the whole crypto thing is a massive bubble, you know. So when my PA, we've done a couple of blog posts, because when my PA's daughter, you know, rings her mum from university and says, everyone's investing in crypto, I feel like I'm missing out. I need to put my money in crypto. I'm going to put my grant in crypto. I'm going to put my loan in crypto. No, do not do that. People are, that's the kind of silly thing that people are doing. So our next job is great. We've got everyone investing. Is how do we teach them to be a bit less now? It's a bit, you know, everyone wants something now. It's deferred gratification. Investing is also a deferred gratification thing. You have to invest for the long term, and it's got to be sustainable. So that's the next thing that I'm trying to figure out, is how do we do that? So we're doing quite a bit on Instagram, and I think the next thing we're going to start doing is some little videos on TikTok and stuff, just to get people thinking about that.
Interesting. So again, correct me if I've got this wrong. There is about sort of 550 in the advice land and 250 in D2C and all direct.
Yes.
And does the inflow sort of follow that 2/3 advice and the rest in direct?
No, so it's about half and half at the moment.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the flows, the D2C flows are strong, really strong.
Right.
So, you know, what we had is we'd had the last 2 or 3 years have been difficult in the UK because of Brexit and all sorts of other reasons, and we won't get into what I think about that. But you know, over the pandemic, over the last year, people have got to the point where they're going, well, I've got so much money in the bank, I can't sit here any longer. So I think having had, you know, when obviously the deal got done, the Brexit deal got done, then we had the ISA season, we had vaccines. So November, December, of the back end of last year, we had some brilliant news. It came in threes. The vaccines were working. You know, Brexit was done, everything else. And then that meant that, so when the year started this year, huge amount of money was pumped into ISAs and pensions. And on both sides, on the intermediate, you know, from the intermediated side and also the D2C, which was great to see. So I think that's going to carry on. People are feeling confident about the future of the UK post-Brexit. And I think the fact that we are pumping so much into infrastructure and vaccine programs and everything else, it gives people another level of confidence that life is going to return to normal.
So do you expect that at some point direct platforms will catch up with advice platform, maybe overtake it, or not? No,
I
okay.
don't. No, I don't. So I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Look, we saw the announcement, didn't we, about Chase, JP Morgan Chase buying Nutmeg.
Yes.
And Nutmeg's the oldest robo in the country, and it's been here for God knows how long.
10 years. 10
Yeah.
years and 100 million of
Exactly.
cash burnt. Yeah.
It's burnt through 100 million of cash. God knows how many CEOs, etc. And it still doesn't make a profit. And the reason it doesn't make a profit, Abraham, is it's bloody hard to recruit customers.
Yeah.
In this, you have to spend a lot of money on customer acquisition. So you need scale. So ultimately, the likes of Nutmeg and others, what they need to be is be part of a much larger a bank, a Lloyd's, it needs to be a mainstream. When you log into your bank, it's right there. And the banks, as we know, got really scared, 10 years ago, because they'd had their wrists slapped. And so they removed every single salesman advisor from the bank. They removed them from the bank branches. And so people have had nowhere to go. Yeah. And my issue with that is that ordinary people in the street, you ask someone about investment, they go, oh, no, but investments aren't for me. I said, people say, why? Well, savings, I don't have enough to invest. No, everyone has enough to invest. And we've created that, and that's partly down to regulation. The FCA also has to, accept that it's been a twat when it comes to regulation. Or we expect people to. People can go and take out a loan, a payday loan, without thinking, and a blink of the eye, and yet we can't let them invest. So there's so many negative connotations attached to investing that people are very, very wary of it. But they're not wary of a loan. They don't care about a loan. A payday loan is fine. Do you see what I mean? Or an ordinary loan. So I think we need to rebalance that. We need to rebalance and maybe reframe the word risk. And what I would say to people, and Abraham, this might be something for you and me to do together one day, but I would say to people, there's good risk and there's bad risk, right? Good risk is leaving home and going to university. Bad risk is staying at home working in Tesco's. Your life's not going to change. Good risk is is applying for a new job and a promotion and going. That might not work out, but it's a risk. It's a good risk that you're prepared to take. So we need to reframe the word risk, and we need to also reframe and the word pension. I think if we can get across to people, because if you talk to people about risk, they're immediately scared. But we need to explain to people it's good risk and bad risk. And there are certain things we just need to reframe that. And I think, and the word pension as well, because people always think that pensions are for far later in life, and they shouldn't worry about them now. So.
I'm going to jump and to a related point that I wanted to get your thoughts on, which is the almighty Vanguard, right? So Vanguard now is essentially flexing its muzzle in all the different directions. It's got its funds, active, passive, multi-asset, it's got it. Then, and ETFs, it's got it, right? It's now got its own platform, at least in the direct space, and that must be touching $1 billion now, I think, or maybe it's exceeded it. Now
it's about 6 billion actually. The Vanguard.
6 billion.
Yeah.
Why? Where have I been? Anyway, okay. And then you've got then it's got its newly launched model portfolio service for the retirement, and it's now coming into the advice market, and I'm speaking to the CEO in a couple of weeks' time. But I wanted to get your thoughts on how do you see, how do you see that? What's your take on what Vanguard's doing in this space?
So what I like about Vanguard is that Vanguard never rushes in and does anything. It's very thoughtful about how it does things. And it came into the UK right about just before RDR
Yes.
really came in and started sort of working in the intermediate. It really waited for RDR. It could have been in before, but it knew it was never going to be able to sell its products through advisors because advisors wanted commission. There was no way they were going to give commission. So it came in then, but everything it does very thoughtfully. And, you know, listen, I've got stuff on. Shall I tell you what I did when I opened my?
Absolutely.
I'll tell you what I did. When I opened my ISA in April 2020, in bang, the pandemic had just started. I opened my ISA. I opened it on Vanguard, and I stuck all 20 grand into an ISA, and I put it all into an 80% life strategy fund.
Yes. Yeah.
And I knew it might go up and down. I thought I'm going to have to close my eyes for the next for the next couple of years. But we're investing for the long term. Yeah. And so, and the way I looked at it is it's cheap. It's really cheap. So even if you do, it's not a perfect, asset allocation, etc. And yes, when the markets go down, it's still really cheap because you and I both know that there's the answer to long-term investing is two things: low cost and asset allocation. That's all. So if you got your costs wrong, you can have a brilliant asset allocation and brilliant investments, but if the costs are too high, forget it. Yeah. So that was my punt on the Vanguard thing. So I can tell you now that actually that's done really well. My ISA's done really, really well, which is good. So it's not ideal for everybody, but it is low cost. They do also have active funds. People forget that, So they do run. They're not a passive provider. They're a low cost provider, and I think that's a good message. This new advisor thing that they've done, the new sort of SIP, the new sort of advice thing. They've set the criteria really, really high, actually. So it's actually quite hard to get selected to be, they've been very, very careful, but it is quite hard to actually get selected to be, to be accepted on the system. But look, I like Vanguard. It is to a certain extent a vertically integrated business because you've got platform, its own funds, etc., etc. But it's a very low cost version, which is preferable to the very high cost version of, say, St. James's Place, which just takes all your money and gives you nothing back. So
do you think that Vanguard is going to make a dent in, say, SJP's market or even the IFA market?
I think it will make a dent in the IFA market, I think. I don't think it will make a dent in the SJP market because people are. I met somebody who was with SJP. Somebody in a bar, older couple. They were in their 60s, just retired, and when they told me that they were with SJP, I said to them, "Oh goodness, poor you!" And they were really, really. But funnily enough, Abraham, they were really annoyed with me. So they said, "We get a very good service from SJP and da-da-da. We never had this kind of service before." So SJP are very, very good at appealing at what people want, and they want glossy brochures. They want to feel like they're being looked after, and of course, everything is written in such a way that you don't actually find out that your investments aren't doing so well, or that they're not, or that they should be doing better, I think is the point. So they appeal to that vanity that people have, look after me, treat me well, etc. But that's an older generation, and I think as time, Vanguard isn't going to be able to take that business away. But as younger people, more informed people, and the younger generations, they've been brought up differently. My kids and your kids, they don't like to pay for anything, as you well know, right? Like everything is, I want to get the fact that we used to buy CDs and albums just amazes my kids. Like, you used to pay for music. That's what you used to pay for music. They're so used to getting it for free, or obviously we've got a Spotify account for them, but that's the thing. These younger generations are much more money conscious, and they want to spend their money on what they want. So they want to have, they want to go traveling, etc., doing that, living their best life. They will, but they don't want to spend it on, paying some advisor to line his pockets. So I think that there's a different mentality going on, and yes, the Vanguards will appeal to the younger generations, and as long as it's doing what it says on the tin, that's the main thing.
Fantastic stuff. We've covered a lot of ground, Bella. There is a whole lot that I still want to talk to you about, but I wouldn't disrespect your time. And of course, my producer, Hannah, she's going to have me for lunch if I keep pushing it. But so that means we have to get you back. We have to get you back on, on the podcast.
I absolutely I feel like I've talked a lot and only answered half of your questions. So if you want to ask me one last question before we go, feel free. But otherwise, we can. I'm happy to come back at another stage and talk about women and saving and kids and everything.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. Look, thank you very much for your time, for your wisdom, for the work that you continue to do in this space. And we're going to reach out in a couple of weeks time, and I don't know, a couple of months, and get you back to dive deeper into all the wonderful stuff that you are doing. So Bella, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Abraham. Thank you for having me.
I'll be remiss if I don't thank my incredible team who worked very hard to put this program together, led by my producer, Hannah Dickinson. Thank you very much, guys. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Timeline app, the retirement planning software, and Batefolio, the high-tech, low-cost flat fee model portfolio manager. And to you, our listeners, thank you for your time. I hope you've had as much fun listening to the program as we have making it. You can find more about the show at retirementals.co.uk, and you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is Abraham on Money. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.